them.
No, they go like
Yeah, Coach, over here to your right. Offensive starts last year weren't necessarily ideal. When you guys went through a self-assessment process, what did you point to areas of improvement, and how do you go about improving?
There's no doubt. Anytime you start a football game, you want to start fast. We always talk about starting fast at the beginning of each half. And the last end and the half as well, and you go through it, and a lot of times a lot of it was execution issues, and then sometimes, to be quite frank, it was a little bit being conservative in those situations. And then the other side of it, the teams we played were pretty good on defense, and stopped us early in games. But that's been a big point of emphasis of ours. There's several of them, but starting fast is one of them. And you'd like to start fast every day, and sometimes every game. But sometimes starting fast, does not necessarily mean your touchdown, or touchdown, field goal, touchdown. Sometimes starting fast is you get a couple first downs and you change the field position. When you go 3 and out to start games, that's something we definitely got to improve on.
Yeah, offensive line obviously banged up a lot last year, had some rough games, and Notre Dame was one of those. Do you feel that you guys have come into kind of this spring maybe with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, hearing about it, all throughout? I know it's a different team, but at the same time, is that something you feel like you've gotten a good response from them to start this?
Well, that's something you'd have to ask them if they have a chip on their shoulder. But I think, we need to play better as a whole offense, and, offensive line, that starts with them. And, we have some youth up front, but there are some guys that are coming back that have experience. And there were injuries, and offensive line is about cohesion and playing together, and we did not play together enough last year to be efficient in all areas, and that's the main thing that we've been working on. We've got to be one unit up front. I think all offensive lines have a little bit of chip on their shoulder because of who they are and how close they are as a group, and I think this group is doing a good job, even though they're young, practicing hard and focusing on day by day.
Mike, what did you learn about Gunner with how he handled the conference championship game, the Sugar Bowl, and then just your early thoughts on what he's shown during fall camp?
I thought Gunner was ready for the moment in the SEC championship game, and it's a hard spot to be in. It's something you talk about with your guys all the time. You're one player way, but quarterback's a different position than any other position. Those other positions, they might not be the starter, but they might get in a rotation. They might get to play on special teams, so they felt. What it's like to be in a game, and a quarterback's a little bit different. But I thought Gunner last year took a step during practice of approaching every practice like it was a game and preparing like he was a starter. And those just aren't words. Gunner probably prepared as hard as anybody on our football team, and he didn't know if he was going to play a snap. So he was ready as far as a preparation standpoint. I know, there were certain things he knows he wishes he could have done better, and he's been working on those things in the offseason and through fall camp, so he can be a more efficient player at that position.
Mike, you talked about the slow starts and working on that this year. Kind of along those lines, what do you want the identity of this offense to be this fall?
Well, I think that's the great thing about fall camp is where you're trying to form your identity of your football team. Now, it's a lot different than it was, 5 to 10 years ago, because 90% of your class is coming in. Came in spring practice and went through spring, and summer's different, and now that we can meet with them and do certain things with them. So you have a better feel of what you are offensively going into fall camp. But, fall camp is a little bit different, that it's, you're practicing every day. It's longer hours. It's a little more taxing. So it's what can your guys handle mentally and physically, and we're trying to figure that out. But you want to put guys in position that can be explosive. I think we got to be more explosive on offense. But I think your identity on, everything starts with the run game. At any level, you've got to be able to run the ball and stop the run. And that's been an emphasis of ours since we got back from the Sugar Bowl and started meeting as a staff and meeting with our players. How can we improve in that area? And I'm not just talking about numbers. I'm talking about being efficient. And a run game is not going to just help you offensively. It's going to help your quarterback. And it's going to help your defense. It's going to help all areas. And, hopefully our identity will be we will be efficient in the run game, and everything will run through that.
Yeah, where do you feel like Nate Frazier has grown the most, both on the field and as the leader of that running back room, especially considering this past spring was the first spring he got to spend here?
Well, I want to give Nate and his coach, Coach Crawford, a lot of credit, because he was one of the few guys that did not come in mid-year last year. He got here in June, and Nate is a tireless worker. He's always in Coach Crawford's office or in the bullpen with some of our quality control guys, trying to catch up. Running back, not as complex as some of the other positions except for pass protection, but this guy dove in. He worked extremely hard. Early in the year, it was, we're trying to get him on the field and get him some touches and didn't put him in a lot of situations that would involve pass protection. By the end of the year, we weren't afraid to have him in there on third down. So I think he's growing as a complete back. I think his next step is, stop trying to look for the home run all the time. That's something we got to get better with all the backs, is that we got to learn to get the dirty yards, and every play is not going to be a home run. A lot of these backs, in high school, they're the best player on the field, and they can bounce anything and turn an average play into an explosive play by bouncing it and out running. This league's different, and working on his steps, working on his vision, and keying the right defender up front and pressing the hole and hitting. And that's something I think in the first 6 practices you've seen an improvement of Nate being willing to stick it in there and get the dirty yards.
Yeah, when we got to see Gunnar last year, he showed a willingness to run, and the team really responded to that. But at the same point in time, he sometimes opens himself up to take very physical hits. As an offensive coordinator and a quarterback's coach, how do you try and coach around that to where you still want to use him and involve him in the run game, but maybe tell him not to take those big steps?
Yeah, it's one thing to say not to do that, and it's another. And on the flip side, it's hard to practice that because our quarterbacks aren't live in practice situations and plays. There's loose plays all the time for the quarterback, and he's a guy that can extend plays and make plays by extending them and throwing the ball downfield and running with the football. So whether we're in a walkthrough or practice, even though he's not getting hit, we're constantly talking about what would you do in this situation. I'm going to get the yards. I'm sliding here. It's third down. I'm going to get the first down, because his makeup and his mentality sometimes is I'm going to go get everything. And there's a time and place for that. And it's one thing to say it. It's a hard thing to practice because he's not getting hit. So we're constantly talking about those things, looking at the film in situations where he's pulled it down, he's extended it, or maybe he's running. What are you going to do here? And we're talking about it. And, we're going to have to live through some of that because, he's got the mentality of a guy that's going to go get it, but he's not, 230, 235 pounds. So he's got to protect himself when he does decide to pull the ball down and run the ball. And then, at the same time, there are going to be some instances where we've got, quarterback runs designed for him, but there's got to be a balance because any play that's called, he could turn it into a quarterback run. So as a play caller, you got to be mindful of that, and it's something we're working through.
Mike, you added a couple of transfer wide receivers, transfer running back in particular, big guy. Colby's back. As a play caller, how will that help the offense?
I think anytime you've got guys, first of all, right now, I think we've got great competition at all the skill spots, at tight end, at running back, at receiver. We brought a lot of guys in. You mentioned the portal guys, but the freshmen at those positions too have provided unbelievable competition. And that's what Coach Smart has built this program around, is competition and building depth. And I like those guys. A lot of them are young, but they're willing and they're eager. And you got to figure out, where we're going to put these guys to get them in the right spot and figure out ways that, sometimes, in the past, we've kind of let the offense run through the quarterback, and he takes, the guy that the defense gives us on maybe a passing concept. But we're going to have to figure out ways to get some of these guys that you mentioned, generate touches for those guys.
Mike, And we just mentioned Colby Young. We've seen him in videos and photos with the blue cap on. What all have you seen from him since he's rejoined the team? And specifically about Noah Thomas, what have you seen from him as well?
Well, I've been extremely impressed with Colby. Colby, one, he's grateful to be here and his opportunity to be at Georgia and, pass that rule, and he got to come back for an extra year and was dealing with a little nagging injury in the spring, but wanted to go through spring and fought through all 15 practices. And, since he's been back every day, he doesn't take a play off. And he's a guy that we brought in out of the portal, but, he is probably the leader in that room. He sets the standard of how to work. And I'm not just talking about whether it's route running or catching balls, it's blocking, it's his effort, and that's become contagious because we've got some talented receivers in that room, and some of them are young, and they need to know what it means, to wear the Georgia uniform, and he represents that every day. And he's got and bring Noah in, and that's a competition, for him, and he hasn't shied away from it. Or Noah. And Noah, through 6 practices, is starting to slow down for him. In the spring was probably a struggle. If you ask him, new system, new terminology, trying to figure everything out, and probably wasn't playing as fast as he would like. And just, our message to him was, it's going to be okay. You just keep your head down, keep working, and you're seeing incremental improvements from him. He's light years ahead of where he was in the spring, and he gives you, another big body outside that can catch those balls that are contested.
Mike, before you came back to Georgia, you had Trey McBride there at Colorado State, and now you've got an assortment of more weapons. Could you maybe expound a little bit on that tight ends rooms and the things that those guys can give you out of that position?
Well, there's, like I said, there's competition in that room, and Coach Harley has done a great job of recruiting guys, but when they're in that room, they know they got to compete. And a lot of times we look at the tight end, the catches that they might have, or the unbelievable plays that Brock or some of these guys have made in the past. But they know that they've got to get dirty, and they've got to block, and they got to put their face on people. And he's done a good job of creating toughness in that room, and those guys don't run away from competition. And it's any year, you've got tight ends, you got receivers, you got backs. You're trying to figure out, what's the best personnel group, what's the best mixture between 12 and 11, or different personnel groups of getting those guys on the field. And I tell them, we go out, we're practicing right now, we're practicing against our defense, and we're not just competing against our defense, we're competing against, those tight ends are competing against those receivers at practice. They want us to be in 12 or even 13 more. So at the end of the day, we're going to put the guys out there that have the most production and are able to create positive plays for us.
Yeah, I guess what have been your early impressions of the 4 freshman receivers that y'all brought in? And you mentioned earlier so many guys are enrolling early now. How much more do you think freshmen are ready to play game one now compared to 10, 15 years ago just from being on the
Well, it definitely gives them a chance, especially at the skill positions. I always tell these guys when we're recruiting them that they want to walk in the door and they expect to be running with the first team and everything go perfect. And I tell them when you come in the spring, you're going to get to go through these walkthroughs and these spring practices where we have a day off and it slows down. That's spring practice and that mid-year, you got to think of that as your redshirt year. You are learning what it means to practice at Georgia and how we practice and learning this playbook. And then you've got summer where we're going to do it all over again. And then you're trying to get yourself in position when fall camp starts where now I can play to my true ability and I'm not thinking. Now that's an ongoing process for those guys, but it definitely gives them a better chance because they're here mid-year, because the rules have changed in the summer where coaches can be around and meet with those guys, and then the staff that our administration allows us to continue to have. We haven't cut corners in our staff. There's guys that meet with these guys year round that puts them in a better position to be ready to play early.
Coach Bobo over here. What have you seen just in the growth from last year to this year in Gunner Stockton? It's kind of a two-parter. And then also, what have you seen this offseason? I know it's early in camp that gives you confidence that this running game will be better this season.
First, Gunner, like I said earlier, he was ready for that moment because of his preparation. I don't think he has not changed, and he's in this offense now for his 4th year, and some of the same notes, some of the same reminders, some of the same coaching points, and that guy every day is taking notes like he's a first-year freshman. Just the attention to detail and ready to go every day at practice is probably a little higher because he knows now he's running out there with the ones the majority of the time at practice. He's worked on things in the offseason fundamentally that you see improvement. We were just in a meeting and we were pointing out the things that we had done during spring practice, post-spring, summer, early in fall camp, fundamentally, and showing us doing the drills individually and how it's correlated to in practice. So, we can always be more efficient in everything we do fundamentally and technique-wise at the quarterback position, and that's something that we've been working on. Gunner's, not just because his name's Gunner, but he's a little bit of a gunslinger and working on, sometimes everything doesn't have to be a howitzer, learning how to layer the ball. And he made a throw yesterday that we pointed out to some things that we had done and, trying to just improve on little things, every day. What can I improve on? As far as second part is about the running game, right? As far as the running game, we that's a big emphasis for us. That's the emphasis number one. I don't think anybody, that's not a secret. Coach Smart said it. I said it, I think, the last time I talked to y'all at the Sugar Bowl. We got to be more efficient in the run game. And again, that doesn't mean numbers. We got to run the ball efficiently and find ways to be explosive in the run game, not just the pass game. What I've seen is every day it's an emphasis for us, all right? When we come together as a unit on offense, we're talking about the run game. And a lot of times we think run game means just offensive line, but it's the offensive line, it's the tight ends, it's the running backs, the right reads, hitting the right tracks, it's receivers blocking downfield, it's quarterbacks getting us in the right run, it's quarterbacks on their fakes. And we made an emphasis every day to point out those things when they're good and they're not up to our standard. And day by day, we're working on those things, and and we know that we've got to be able to run the ball, and that's the point of emphasis right now.
Got time for one more one-part question.
You heard that, Roddy? One part.
I had two questions. Okay, well, let's go back to this spring. There was a rumor around that you were going to retire. Your health was bad. How are you feeling?
You started that rumor.
I did not start that. I shut that rumor down.
Did you ask me that at Sugar Bowl?
I did ask you at Sugar Bowl,
Okay.
but it came out again. So I just wanted to get you on the record.
No,
are you feeling okay? Are you here for the long haul?
No, I feel great. Everybody knows I had some health issues when I was at Colorado State, and I deal some of that with some nerves in my feet. But I feel great, and I'm probably as excited as I've ever been. Not that I'm trying to prove something. I'm excited that college football has changed a little bit. You're coming. You've got a new team. You've got a lot of new guys, and we've got a lot of young guys. We're a young football team, and there's a lot of eager guys that are hungry to learn and hungry to be here and excited to be here, and that gets you fired up as a coach. And when kids don't, they're not excited about being at Georgia or wherever I'm at or playing football for the love of the game, then that's probably when I won't do it. But as far as my health, I feel great, and it's awesome to be here coaching these guys because every day they come over here, they're bright-eyed and they're trying to learn. All right, thanks, guys.